Welcome to Inside Missions, a production of Maranatha Volunteers International, offering an in-depth look at the people, the cultures, and the countries where Maranatha is working. I'm Dustin Kalm, and today we have someone whose journey has taken him from the former Yugoslavia, escaping war by coming to the United States, running his own construction business, and transitioning from a passionate Maranatha volunteer to now working for Maranatha. His name is Danny Poljak, and we're going to hear his story today and how missions impacted his life. Danny, welcome to Inside Missions.
Thank you for having me.
So Danny, across your lifetime, you've had to adapt and change in different situations, and you've even reimagined your purpose and calling at different stages of your life. And we'll get into all of that, but let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up, and what did you think of missions as a kid?
As you mentioned, I grew up in former Yugoslavia. That is not the name of the country right now, but at that time it was Yugoslavia, so I was born there, raised there. My father was a pastor for a church and union at Yugoslavia Union. So I was interacting with people that were coming and visiting Yugoslavia from foreign countries, from division, from General Conference. And I was intrigued listening mission stories, and I was always thinking how nice it would be that one day somewhere I can experience that what they are talking about.
So you're seeing all these people coming in talking about the work of the Adventist Church around the world, and
Yes.
that's a kind of a fun front row seat that you had as a kid there.
Yes.
Yeah. You end up, as you get older, going to university and studying theology for a time. Why did you choose to study theology?
Well, besides doing my engineering education, at that point I thought it would be interesting to get more deeper into theology and Bible, and maybe one day become a theology professor.
So you did engineering first and then studied some theology?
Some theology, yes.
Yeah, okay. Did you learn anything through your time in engineering, studying for engineering or theology that is something that sometimes you go through school and sometimes you're wondering, does this really apply to my life? Am I going to remember this in 5 years, 30 years? Anything that you remember from your time at university that you still keep with you to this day?
Well, I always liked construction, and I was fascinated by complicated structures and buildings, and looking through magazines and some structures that were built in Yugoslavia. But that stayed with me up until now.
And it sounds like that's something that even before university, you were always interested in architecture and how things were built. And, yeah.
Yes.
So all young men at that point in Yugoslavia had mandatory military service, and you served for a year in the military. What was that like?
Well, that was interesting. At that time, as you said, it was mandatory, and I served in part of the country that was away from where I lived. That was the kind of procedure. They didn't want to keep you close to home. They want you to be away. So I ended up in special engineering forces, dealing with explosives and mines and those kind of things, landmines. And it's, for me, it was exciting because we were really doing and dealing with real stuff.
What did you blow up? What were some of the things that you're exploding?
Well, we were blowing some manufactured pieces of structures and those kind of things, and we had to calculate how much explosive is needed to destroy something, or just to not to destroy completely, but just make it to fall and being able to repair after.
So making it inoperable.
That's right.
Maybe you'd told me earlier, like if the enemy came through,
Yes.
so they couldn't use it,
In
but
case
it's not
of
completely
invasion.
destroyed.
In case of invasion.
Interesting. Were you ever scared you were going to blow yourself up?
Well, It was interesting, yes. Sometimes you are dealing with real stuff, and you are messing up with detonator and those kind of things. And I remember one instance where it was freezing cold, and I was isolated because it could have happened, but it didn't, right? But I remember vividly how much sweat was going down my back.
So it's just like in the movies. If you have to
That's
deal with
right.
that, you're
Yes.
definitely on edge.
Yes.
Yeah. I was telling Danny earlier, it's ironic to me because now, for his whole life, basically, he's been all about building things up. But there was this one period of time where you were 100% focused on blowing things up and tearing them down.
Yes.
So,
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's something that you cannot experience unless you are in a particular situation.
yeah. And God has used you to raise up so many structures now in the mission field around the world.
Yes.
We'll get to all of that. But just kind of a funny side note, at one point you were becoming an expert in blowing things up and destruction. You were always kind of fascinated with construction. What drew you to it as a business, as a career in Yugoslavia?
After I finished my education, I had a chance to work with some companies, and also there was opportunity to do that as a business. So I worked on different projects, some large, some smaller. I also had a chance to work for church, building some churches over there and doing some remodelings. So there are few churches still standing that I had a chance to build.
Wow. And you told me you started your business young, right? I mean, you were 23, 24 years old, something like that.
Yes.
So, man, what is that like running your own business as a 23-year-old?
Well, it was interesting at that time there because country was in a transitions, socialism and those kind of things. So there were lots of restrictions how far and how big your business can be. But I stayed in a regulation, and it was a very interesting time.
Skipping ahead real quick, you now help Maranatha with construction of all sorts of buildings, and you had told me before you worked on a wide variety of projects as a young man there in Yugoslavia. How did some of those different types of projects prepare you for the type of different, unique structures you were going to be a part of with Maranatha?
Well, it's different how things are built over there. They're more solid than what we see here in the U.S. Residential things are more wood, plywood, and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. Over there is more solid bricks, blocks, concrete. So that is more closer to what Maranatha is doing.
True. So
we don't build with wood and those kind of things, but we do blocks, steel, concrete. Yeah. So that's
interesting. You were already kind of ready for it.
That's right. Yeah.
And I should have had you list off some of the different unique kinds of projects that you worked on there.
As I said, I worked on churches, I worked on roads, infrastructure for big developments, water tanks, and those kind of things.
So a good variety.
Yeah, all kinds of things, yes.
Now, you get married at this point in your 20s, and things start to get a little tense in the region there as Yugoslavia begins to collapse and there's potential for war. What are you thinking as a young couple, considering your future? You have this business with all this stuff going on.
Since I've served in military, and after you are out, you go into reserve. When that kind of situation happen, then they can draft you. So since in my mind the whole situation was senseless, I didn't want to be drafted, and I had some friends that they did. Some came back, some didn't because they lost their life. So we were thinking, okay, what should we do? And then we figured out, well, let's see if we can go out and start doing things somewhere else.
And how did you end up in the United States?
At first, I ended up in Great Britain, where my wife's sister lived. So we couldn't stay there because of immigration things. And then we figured out that my cousin lives in Sacramento, and we connected, and we figured out how to obtain visa and come out from Serbia and come to U.S.
What was the hardest part about moving to the U.S.?
Well, the hardest thing was different language, learning the language. My wife, she was fluent in English, but I was not. I learned some in school, but that was not enough. So I had to start from scratch, and it was not easy task.
That's so hard, right? I mean, you're coming to a new country, you're trying to work, you're trying to build a life, and you don't know the language. Really difficult.
So I figured out, I'm going to start watching news on TV and interviews and reading articles and take the words out and start learning.
So you never took a class or anything? You just kind of took it all in?
I took some classes in Serbia, in Yugoslavia. But then while I stayed in Great Britain, I was attending a English school for a couple of months.
So you had to lose the British accent when you got over here.
Yes.
So you start a new construction business in the U.S. You do a lot of remodels. You have your daughter. Things are moving along nicely in your journey of life. When does Maranatha enter the picture?
It was 2011. One Sabbath morning, I went to different church, not church that I was regularly attending, and because something was happening over there, and I saw my friend that was attending that church, and all of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, he asked me why I don't come to India with them, because he was part of the project with Maranatha. At that point, I was like, India? I mean, how do I do that? How I leave my business? How is this? How is that? And after we talked more, he convinced me that I should go. So I went back home and talked to my wife, and we prayed, and it happened that I was able to go. It was quite a miracle.
What intrigued you most about this invitation from him?
Well, I always wanted to be part of mission, but just for some time I thought that is not the right time. But then I said, well, when is going to be the right time? I just thought that maybe this is the call and this is the right time. And it's amazing how sometimes we don't call somebody for mission, but we should. I mean, you never know. If that didn't happen at that time, I don't know. Maybe I would not connect with Maranatha.
It's all these little moments through life where if you're listening or not, or if you're ready or not to what God has in store for you, your life could take totally different paths.
Yes.
Absolutely. What was the most impactful thing for you on this trip? You told me earlier when we were talking that it was sort of a shock going to India. What was the experience like?
Well, yes, it was a shock because it's completely different culture, faraway country. People are different. The religion is different. They speak so many dialects. So on that first trip, I started understanding India a little bit. It's not easy to kind of digest everything that is happening there, but it was so good project, so good trip, and I came back blessed and encouraged and just willing to do more of that.
And so you find yourself doing a different kind of construction than you had been doing in the United States. What did you think of the whole construction process and what Maranatha had set up there?
Well, at that time, Maranatha was doing insulated panel walls. So that was a project that we were doing.
And was this a church?
It was a school.
A school.
So we were doing a couple of buildings, and it was in Andhra Pradesh, in Guntur city of Guntur, it was so hot and humid and just very, very different. I mean, it was hard on the body, but it was very good for spirit.
So you're struggling every day through the heat, through the hard manual labor. Was there a moment on that project where you felt a sense of like this pull to do this kind of thing more, or was that something that came about later?
Well, yes, and I was trying to understand the country and trying to understand what Maranatha is doing, and also on that project at that time we were able to do evangelism. So every night we were doing 4 different locations where people were coming, and thousands of them, and that impressed me a lot. Now we cannot do that in India anymore, but that was kind of a very interesting extra thing that I experienced there.
Did you get a chance at all during that project to kind of step back and like think about yourself as a kid? Here I am seeing all these worldwide travelers coming through and telling their stories about what's happening, what God's doing, where they live or where they've been traveling. Now here I am, halfway around the world doing some of God's work here.
Yes, because it was not just evangelism. It was not just construction. It was not just crazy traffic, but we had a chance to visit villages and see people where they live. I mean, that impacted me a lot because you see people that are happy and willing to give you whatever they have, but they have nothing. If you have not been in the villages in India, then you should visit India and see how they live.
Would you say that this project changed your life?
In a way, yes. It was tough and interesting, complex because it was India, but yes, it changed my life in a way that I wanted to do more of that.
How soon before you? Well, first of all, how did you describe this experience to your family?
Well, when I came back with lots of colorful pictures because everything is colorful, how they dress and everything else there. So I started sharing that with my church, with my family, wife, and little daughter. And she was so impressed, so encouraged that she told me that next time when I go to India, she is coming with me. At that time, I thought that, India is maybe a little rough for a little girl.
It's a long journey, for sure.
It's a long journey and all kind of things that are happening there. So I said, we'll see, But she went back and she started watching Maranatha mission stories, and she figured out that there are family projects that kids can go.
Now you can't get out of it, Dad.
No,
there's a project just for me.
That's right. So that is what she said one day when I came back from work. Dad, I can go. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, there are family projects where kids can go. So next time, you need to take me to the project. And that is how she started. And
and what can you say?
No.
Yeah. You're right. I don't know. So was that the next project that you went on? Or I think you went on multiple projects before that one when you took her, yes?
Yes, I went to few, and then she started coming with me. And almost on every family project that I was going to, she was coming with me.
What was it like taking your daughter all the way to India?
Well, we were going to different countries. India came later for her. Okay. But
I just am thinking of her testimony she gave at our convention a few years ago, and you know what? I'll link to Anella's speech here in the description of this episode. But that wasn't her first Maranatha project, but it was the long-awaited one from that first project you went on, saying, "Hey, you got to take me to India." So, her first project that you took her on, where was that, and what was that experience like?
It was in Nicaragua. It was also a family project. And we were working on painting EEC building.
That's one of our large education evangelism centers. Yeah.
So she was involved on that. I think that she was 7 years old on that project, if I'm not mistaken. But that impacted her a lot. We were staying at the hotel that's been called Green Monster, and people through Maranatha know about that, and that was kind of a
I've heard of it.
interesting accommodation. But she loved it. She loved it. She played with different kids and other volunteers, so she had a great time.
I think that's a really great age. My kids went on the first family project with you in Peru, and they were 7 and 9 at that point. I think it's a really good age because they are definitely old enough to kind of take everything in, and yet it's also, they're still kind of young, so it's an opportunity for them to see all this at a young age, and they loved it.
I think we should include kids in projects and take them as soon as we can, because they'll start looking at mission in different way, and they'll broaden their perspective about the world. They'll start traveling, and in most of the cases, that stays with them for life.
Yeah. You know, you're a parent and you have a kid in this age range, and, you know, I know some people might just think of all the realities, right? It is going to be a long journey. May not be. If you're going to the Dominican Republic from the United States, you know, that's not a long journey. But it could be if you're going to Kenya or Zambia or India. So yes, that would be one thing. Yes, they might be tired. Yes, you might have a little more stress because you are not worrying about just yourself, but you're worrying about the kids. But man, you start listing off all of those negative possibilities, and then you start adding up all of these positives on the other side. I mean, what encouragement would you give to a young family that's considering whether or not they can actually handle taking their kids on one of these family projects?
Well, it's costly, I know that, but as soon as you can, you should start taking your kids to family projects, because they'll see the world differently, and they'll start experiencing mission in different fields and understand that life around the world is not even close as California life or U.S. life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. So you continue serving. You were going on Maranatha projects every year, maybe more than once a year for
yes,
a number of years?
Some years, 1, 2, 3. There are 2 years that I went like 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
So now I have, I think, 35 projects.
So your life is definitely impacted on that very first project to India. How did you see your life changing or being impacted as you continued to go on more and more, a higher quantity of projects over the years?
Well, I realized that doing business is okay thing, making money is okay thing, but I just experienced something that is more fulfilling, more blessing, that regular work can give you. So I just continue going, need what's there, and Maranatha was asking if I can go with this project or that project, and I never said no.
And here you are.
Here I am.
Was there a moment where you thought, hey, I wonder if I could do this full time? I wonder if I could make the transition, because you still had your business this whole time, all these years, and that's a really hard thing to juggle, because when you're gone, right, it's hard to make money if you're not at the job. So how did you navigate all of that? And was there a moment where you said, you know what, I think this is the time that God's calling me? Well,
I started thinking after so many projects that it would be interesting to do something like this on more regular basis. And some years ago, that conversation started, and here I am now, almost 5 years now.
What do you do for Maranatha? What is the work that you do every day?
Well, I work under our vice president of projects, and we work closely together. I work on plans and making sure that things are updated as they should be. If we need to do some changes, we change that. We send that to a draftsman. We talk to architect and structural engineer if things can be as they are or they need to be recalculated. And also I work on projects without volunteers, with our in-country guys that are in different countries.
What has been the most unique structure that you've had to work on for Maranatha? Or complicated, or...
Well, I would say that is our school complex, Ciudad del Cielo in Dominican Republic in Santo Domingo, where we have 3 different structures there. And we are doing them very nicely with lots of details that we don't do usually. And that is probably the most complex project that I was working on with Maranatha.
The layout is difficult because of the land and everything. Yes. We're doing some different things on the facade. There is a foyer that is different that we have not been doing before. So that is a little more complex, and that required more engineering and things working with our in-country guys to make sure things are done right, because we were doing flat roof, and inside we are doing ceiling fans and air conditions. We are tiling the floors and all kinds of things. Insulated roofing. Do you get excited when it's a unique, kind of complicated problem? Yeah.
I love it.
That's why you're the right guy for the job.
Yeah.
If there's any kind of unique situation, he's ready to tackle it. And you have to be creative.
Yes. I worked in my life in different circumstances, different structures, different buildings. And what we do with Maranatha is not that complex, and I really enjoy. I really enjoy working with volunteers when I'm on a project with volunteers, but also with our in-country guys that are amazing. I mean, they can do whatever plan asks them to do. So
those guys are super talented. What do you enjoy most about working with them?
Well, they are so experienced, they are knowledgeable, and they are creative. I always ask them, okay, what do you think about this? Is there any other way? Because you do this every day. Tell me if you have any idea that we can do this differently.
Yeah.
And they come up with good ideas.
Well, it's just so interesting to me because, a lot of people see our standard structures, whether it's a one-day church or a school building, and we kind of have our set, template for each of those buildings, and we kind of have that nailed down. But there are some projects here and there where, people see the finished product, but there was a lot of work that had to go into making it happen because it just wasn't going to work out very easily for one reason or another. So that's where it's all the work that you guys do is so important that I just want to shed a little light on, because people may not realize sometimes that how much has to go into some of those more complicated projects. I was going to ask you, Maranatha has our standard structures that we build, and those designs have evolved over the years from one-day church to just kind of regular churches that we use blocks to build up the walls. We have the big education and evangelism centers that we mentioned earlier that might have 10, 12, 14, 16 classrooms or spaces around a central auditorium. In general, how strong are Maranatha buildings?
They are very strong. They are engineered up to the U.S. codes, and sometimes when we build something in different country, they are telling us why you are putting so many rebars, why you are doing so much cement, why this, why that. But that is how we do it, and everything has been calculated by structural engineer, and we follow the plan.
Well, and we've heard reports of a huge monsoon rolled through this area where we've built churches, and or a big some big windstorm or whatever, and then it damages all sorts of buildings. We try to check in with local Adventist church leadership there. Hey, what has been damaged, and our structures are always still standing. So
Yes.
it's a fantastic testament to the quality of work that Maranatha does and the designs that we have implemented.
Yes.
So wonderful. Last question here for you. You have been involved with construction for your whole time with Maranatha as a volunteer and also now working for Maranatha. But you also go on volunteer projects. As I mentioned earlier, you were with my kids and my family when we went to Peru on that family project. What do you enjoy about being on a volunteer project? Because you're a construction guy, but you also really love the volunteer projects and working with those volunteers.
Well, that is what the essence of Maranatha is, to be able to take volunteers on short mission project and give them opportunity to experience something that they would never be able to experience unless they go to mission project. I like to work with volunteers because you meet different people. Some are newcomers. Some are coming again on a project. I develop friendship with them. We worship together. We work together. But also, as many trips I went to, I'm able to kind of step back and see the excitement and change in volunteers when they experience what I experienced so many times. And that is so rewarding to encourage them to work, to volunteer, to come again on a project. And most of them, they come back on second, third, and who knows how many projects. I mean, it's amazing to work with them, with people that come from different walks of life. And for 10 days, they work so harmoniously that is unbelievable. I mean, all the differences are set aside, and we just come together, work, and experience Holy Spirit and see what God can do through gifted hands and through Maranatha.
You're also in a unique situation because you get to see the whole process, like from
Yes.
when the plans are just paper to actually seeing this finished building that all the volunteers, you get to participate in so many different phases of that whole process.
I love that. That is something that I really enjoy. Working in an office where we start planning, making plans, and then see the whole implementation of those plans. But also being able to bring volunteers and work with them and just give them the opportunity to experience something that might change their life. And most of them, if you would ask them, yes, they come back changed and blessed.
Well, Danny, we're just so thankful that you're on Maranatha's team and that you help make sure these buildings are strong and that they last for generations. And thank you so much for your leadership on volunteer projects and for sharing your testimony today of your kind of life's journey that's taken you so far to so many different places, and yet God has you right where He wants you. And if we ever need some demolition work done on any Maranatha buildings, we'll know who to call.
Well, I hope not.
I hope not either. Hey, if you are just listening to Inside Missions for the first time, why don't you share it with a family member or a friend? It really helps us to grow our show audience. Leave a review, and really appreciate you listening. Thanks so much.